Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We are thrilled to be doing our sixth Cooper Assembly. For those of you who don't know myself or Cooper, my name is Dr. Erin O'Connor. I am a developmental psychologist by training. I lead the early childhood program where I'm a professor at New York University, and I am also chief of education here at Cooper. And for those of you not as familiar with Cooper as others, just a little brief bit about us. Our goal is really to just support parents in all of the journey that is parenthood and to make the most of the ups and the downs and the in-betweens. And this really means coming together as a group and talking with other parents and with experts about everything from potty training to tantrums to sleep. We are really here to help, hopefully give those aha moments of when everything seems to come together, right? So that's what we do here at Cooper. And today we are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Whitney Casares, founder of Modern Mommy Doc. Whitney is a private practice pediatrician, an AAP spokesperson and published author, a podcast host, and medical review board advisor for Prevention Magazine, as well as a mom to two girls. Her mission is to help working moms break the cycle of burnout in parenting and shift their focus to their own health and well-being so they can create a sense of balance that fosters greater joy in all areas of their life. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, it is my pleasure to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. I think, what you do is so important. I mean, I've sort of been in this research world for many, many years, right? And the research has consistently been telling us how important maternal well-being is. Even I think it's so interesting, even when you think about the effects of childcare on children, a lot of it is, occurs through how well the mother feels about the choices that she's made in terms of childcare, in terms of employment, and how that's communicated often unintentionally to her children. And so much work, of course, on maternal depression and children's well-being, but yet, when you're on Instagram, when you're, sort of looking through the parenting section at the bookstore, if anybody goes to the bookstore anymore, right? So much of it is really, it feels like, okay, if I do something for myself, that means I'm putting my children second. And that's discouraging, right? Given all we know. So I know that that's part of the reason that you started Modern Mommy Doc, but in addition to that, were there also things that you were seeing in your practice as a physician that inspired you to do this?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that I was seeing in my practice and in my own life. When I first started being a mom and being in practice, I felt like I kind of had it all together. I know that I felt pretty judgmental about a lot of the parents that were there, that I felt like, just get it together. Are you kidding me? Like, sleep train your kid, like feed them solids. Like, what's wrong with you? And then I had my own child and I was working and juggling and balancing. And I felt like I actually didn't have a way to organize my stress. People kept telling me, like, you're doing too much. It's just that there's too much going on. There's just too much on your plate. And I realized, like, that actually wasn't the problem. The problem was that I didn't have a way to kind of compartmentalize the different various types of stress that were in my life. Some of those stressors were things that needed to just be eliminated, but a lot of them were things I needed to figure out how to have other people do. A lot of them were things that I needed to figure out how to deal with myself in a way that was compassionate. You were talking about childcare choices, like, how can I actually be kind to myself when I'm putting my child in childcare, or when I'm not totally paying attention to my kid all day, every day when I'm at home with them? How do I differentiate between self-care that's selfish and self-care that's actually helpful to me? Because actually I do think there's a difference. You'll see a ton on Instagram that's like, it's never selfish if you're taking care of yourself. And like, that's amazing. Our kids always benefit from that. And I'm like, actually, that's not true at all. Like, I see parents all the time that are like, don't pay enough attention to their kids and need to be giving their kids more attention. All these memes that are on Instagram that are like, I don't know if it's okay to swear, but like, it's, you're not a bleep bleep parent. You're not a SHITT, parent. Like, you're fine. I'm like, well, no one intends to be a bad parent, but I have seen some parents that are like kind of killing it a little bit more than other parents are, So kind of dealing with the emotional stresses, but then also the practical stresses. And I found that my parents that I saw in clinic, but then also for myself, kind of had this sense that everything was like all under one umbrella. When really, when you can organize your stress and find sustainable solutions for stress, it makes it so that then it's not so overwhelming and you can think more clearly and respond instead of react to your kids, but also to all the stresses that come up in your life.
So well said. And I love how you kind of made that distinction between self-care that helps and maybe what could be termed selfish care. Because, and I'd love to hear just a little bit more sort of about what's the difference.
Yeah, totally. So I think there's a difference between things that are unhealthy coping practices or maybe go to an extreme. Hold on, guys. I'm going to take the dog out of here for 1 second because she's clicking. Hold on. Come here, puppy. Come here. See, that was unnecessary stress that had to be eliminated. Okay.
I gotta say that.
I'm sitting here like trying to keep her on the carpet as I talk. No need. Just put her outside. Okay, so I think the way to differentiate it, and this is borne out in the literature for people, for adults, right? Is there some things that we do to cope with stress that end up causing more collateral damage to us? So I think the easiest example would be to think about, like, it's fine to have like one drink, at night to relax after like hard day at work. Probably not that helpful or healthy for us to have 5 or 6 drinks every single night. You know what I mean? Like, fine for us to like get our nails done if we want to on like a free day or to make an appointment for that. Probably not great to spend like all weekend long at a spa day and never spend time with your children. So I think it's about a spectrum of like excess and then the why behind it. Like, am I doing this because I'm like, I gotta get a dopamine rush. I need to feel better. Oh my gosh, I'm so down and low. Now I gotta get really high, either like literally, or I need to get high on like life. You know what I mean? That's a problem. Versus I'm going to do things that are preventative, that make it so that I'm consistently caring for myself or doing things that feed into my soul and to what makes me feel like I'm feeling good all day long and I'm connected to myself and I'm in the space where I can be the most compassionate, the most responsive possible all day long. And I think all of us have kind of like an intuitive sense of how that feels different. When you're kind of doing something in reaction and then you feel horrible the next day, like you have a hangover or you spent too much money at Nordstrom or whatever, or you're doing things and you're like, man, I took really good care of myself today. I exercised, I ate a kale smoothie today. You know what I mean? To me, that's like true self-care.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Because that distinction is so important. So thinking about, feeding your soul, one thing that doesn't, right, is shame, for so many reasons. It's linked to depression, it's harsh parenting. So can you speak towards why, if you look at a lot of the research, especially, I guess, since the pandemic, but, before that as well, why moms are feeling so much shame, and what are some strategies to help cope with that feeling of shame that I think we all get at some point?
Totally. I think the main reason moms feel so much shame is because the expectations that are put on them are really unrealistic. It's unrealistic to look like a Kardashian. It's unrealistic for all of us, unless we spent billions of dollars. It's unrealistic to be like the super mom meme with the cape on and you're like, I'm gonna be able to like cook amazing meals and pick my kids up from school and kill it at my career and I go to yoga 5 times a week. Like, nobody can do that. And yet we've painted, I think, in social media, but also in the corporate world with this idea of like lean in all the way, all the time, that we should be able to do it all the time, all the way to the nth degree. So when we can't do that, we feel so much like, I'm less than, gosh, there must be something wrong with me. Gosh, I must have to like work a little harder. I gotta like get my calendar a little bit better organized. And the reality is that it's more about, I think, changing your perspective of what actually really matters to you. Where do you want to put your focus, your time, your energy? Where do you want to like go whole hog 100%? And when do you want to do it? So for example, I think, when my kids were really young, when they were 2 and 3, and especially my oldest daughter, she has high functioning autism. When she was having a lot of trouble behaviorally, I had to say, you know what, like we're eating takeout every night. We're gonna like have a messy house. We're gonna, like not pay or do anything with the leaves in the backyard. It's just gonna be, and I'm gonna go to work and I'm gonna pay attention to my kid. And that's it. I didn't look as put together during those years, and really like, who cared? Now that my kids are older and they're at school from 8:30 to 3 every day, and we have more childcare things, I mean, that makes it so that now I have more time and more bandwidth to focus on what I want to. But if I had subscribed to this idea of like, oh no, I have to do it all in order to be okay, I know I would fall short, because it's just so unattainable for everyone.
Yes, that ungodly pressure, I think that we feel it's so hard. So I love your posts and the information you provide. And recently you said something which I always thought was just really interesting, and I wanted to hear more about, was how resentment equals giving up. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means?
Yes. So what I see from my Modern Mommy Doc followers, we have a podcast, we have an app, we have a website and social media following, is that people a lot of times when we'll put posts, will comment on like, well, my kids, like, they won't clean up their rooms. Well, my partner, he or she doesn't do their fair share of like the laundry or of getting everything together. Well, my job, they don't take care of me in like the way that I want them to. I wish that they would like do more to support me. And my philosophy, and I think just the way the world works, is very much that while we work on all of those relationships, while we work on everybody else, while we advocate for systemic change, for example, for caregivers to be better supported, we also have to do the work inside of us to say like, well, why am I so resentful to these other people? And what do I need to do to show up for myself? How do I need to take care of myself in those small ways of 5 minutes a day, maybe where you're just quiet with yourself and observing your thoughts? How do I need to build in maybe 3 times a week, something that just I love to do? If that's a walk by yourself with your dog, if that's meeting a friend and having a coffee, if that's like me, like jumping on an exercise bike and blaring Justin Bieber as loud as I possibly can, right? Like, what can I do while I'm waiting for the world to change? And then how can I learn, like, what tools do I need to be able to have the conversations with these people, or to set up the structures to manage the stress, to say, okay, I'm not gonna live like this my whole life. I have to have you take that on. And if you can't do it, then I got to go find somebody else to do it. We moved into a house that accommodates my nanny, and who has been our longtime babysitter for a very long time, and her daughter, who's 4 years old and has special needs. We moved into this house so that she could live. There's like a daylight basement in the bottom, and then a middle floor, then us on top. And 90% of the reason that we moved into this house is because my husband, bless his heart, with his ADHD and like disorganization and stress that he gets, like, we needed an extra adult to be able to do some of the work and like taking care of people. And I knew that I was kind of at my limit, and I knew that I kept on like pushing against this wall with my partner to be like, please do more, please do more. And like, it just didn't happen. And so I brought in literally like a third adult to be able to help me. And financially works for us because we don't pay her anymore. So then she pays us rent, like that type of thing. And everybody's different in terms of their financial situation. But the alternative for me was to resign myself to being continually resentful to my partner and to my life. being like, I guess my life just sucks. And so I think that's what I mean when I say like resentment means giving up. It means like, I'm just going to be miserable. And I just don't want that for working moms or working caregivers. I think we deserve better than that.
I think that's such a good point. And I'm just curious, like, in the moment, sometimes when you are in that hole of resentment, anxiety, getting yourself out of it to then know how the supports you need and how to get those supports. Like, do you have any advice on sort of recognizing when you're there and then recognizing, this is what I need, I guess?
Yes. Okay. There's two things that I would say. One, mindful self-compassion is the most important evidence-based tool that I have ever learned and practiced. Kristen Neff and Christopher Garner have a whole workbook and book that's on this. It's basically the practice of being mindful of what your feeling is in the moment, stopping, validating that feeling for yourself, kind of embracing this idea of common humanity, if I'm not alone in this feeling, and then making some type of response. So it's basically emotion coaching for adults. So for little kids, the way I like to explain it is like, if the little kid's angry because another kid took their toy, you might say like, yeah, you feel angry. And then you would say like, that makes sense that you feel angry because someone took your toy. And then you'd be like, I bet, any 3-year-old would feel angry if someone took their toy. That's common humanity. And then you'd be like, so what can you do? You could play with a different toy, or we could ask politely how long they're going to play with it, yada, 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 right? And so for adults, we can do the same thing. I can be like, I'm so resentful right now. My gosh, like catch myself in the emotion. It doesn't mean I have to change it. I can just be like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I asked him 8 times to take out the trash. He hasn't done it. Then be like, I bet you every single woman on this block would feel the exact same way if her partner didn't do that, right? That's common humanity. And then I can say like, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? Now I have had like the second to process the emotion, to feel it, to not be like, oh, well, I'm a jerk for feeling bad about that. Or like, I'm so angry. It kind of allows you to talk about it. So mindful compassion is great for resentment. It's also great for anxiety. It's great for depression. It's great for like all the emotions basically that we all feel. So I think that's a great like moment to moment practice. The other thing that I do a lot is move. I mean, I get the best ideas for my writing, for my podcasts, for speeches when I'm moving. And so when I'm feeling stuff like that and I can't tell exactly like why I am the way I am, I do a lot of just like, I'm going to go on a run. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to jump on the bike. I'm going to do yoga. I'm just going to do anything I can to move my body and try to like get out of my head for a second, and allows me to process. So that's what I would recommend. And then the other thing is, of course, like things like talking to a friend or, therapy is amazing, but those things take a minute to set up. So the movement and the mindful self-compassion are things you can access right in the moment.
I love that. I was talking to a fellow psychologist the other day, and she was saying, she's like, I wish sometimes what we're getting really good at with our younger children, which is naming the emotion, accepting the emotion, recognizing that movement helps with, cognitive processing. She's like, with adults, she's like, yeah. I feel like as adults, we often forget that, or, that wasn't part of sort of how we were brought up. So just exactly like you're saying.
Yeah. And thank goodness they are teaching our kids, like in the schools. We have room for improvement, but I'm seeing it at least being talked about even in kindergarten. Like, how are you feeling? What are your emotions? Oh, this is like the amygdala. My child came home the other day. My first grader was like, Mom, have you heard of the amygdala? I was like, yes, I have. It's very exciting.
That's awesome. So Whitney, something that we sometimes like to do is, think about with our guests, how their career has influenced, and you spoke a little bit about this already, but their parenting and how being a parent has also influenced sort of your career. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh my goodness. I mean, in terms of my parenting influencing my career, I would not be a good pediatrician if I weren't a parent. I think that there are some people who can objectively really help people really well. And, there's lots of infectious disease parts of pediatrics and things like that you can do if you've never had kids. But in terms of meeting people where they are in terms of recognizing worry and having empathy and creating nuance in my responses to parents' needs. Being a parent has helped me in infinite ways. And then I think my career in terms of being a parent, I think that when you're a doctor, you learn how to triage, you learn how to prioritize. So I actually, when I created my whole centered life framework that we use at Modern Mommy Doc, it really was born out of this idea of like, you have a lot of stress when you're a doctor. You have like a paper that needs to get signed, a school form that comes right at you. You have a nurse's call coming in. You have patients you're supposed to see. You have a colleague that's asking you a question. You have a nurse that needs you. And like, I've learned over time how to really figure out like what needs to be addressed right now, what needs a response if I'm going to get to you in a minute, what needs to be completely ignored. And I use that a ton in my parenting. Like, okay, you just called your sister like a poopy pants. Okay, that's not like a major infringement. You're whatever, we're ignoring that. Okay, you just like, sliced your hand with a knife. Okay, that we're gonna definitely pay attention to right this second. But what I really need to do is like put a bandage on it, see how it goes. You told me that you hated yourself when I picked you up from school. Okay, that deserves like all my attention right this second, right? So I think it's that prioritizing and filtering that you do as a physician that's really helped me in my parenting probably the most. And then of course, just I've seen so many kids that I know what's normal and what's not. And I just tend to not freak out about much from a illness perspective ever at this point.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I hear you about being a parent though. I was just thinking back to when I first started teaching psychology before children, and it just all seemed very easy to me. Like, I was like, I don't get why people get so worked up about this. Like, this is easy. Like, you put them on a feeding schedule, like, and most of them are securely attached anyways. And then it was like, oh, wow, this is a whole different ball game.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame. I think once you're a parent, it's like you don't realize before you're a parent how the parents' needs factor into this. Going back to what we said originally, that like when you're not a parent and you're giving people advice about how to support their children psychologically, you're just thinking about the kid. Like you're not necessarily thinking like, oh, well, then what does this parent need? Even to like suggest to a parent, like, make sure you brush your kids' teeth like 3 times a day. Well, like, how is the person who's like doing childcare and they're trying to rush out the door to get to their own workplace in the morning? There's been plenty of times that we don't get the kids' teeth brushed in the morning. And I'm a pediatrician. Like, it's because I have my own thing and like the dog has to get walked and all the different factors that come into it. I think that's the thing as a parent, as a psychologist and as a physician, that you just understand that things are a little more complex than your original advice was.
Totally. You touched on this briefly when you were talking about your framework. Can you talk a little bit more about your framework? Because I think it's really helpful in terms of sort of just thinking about this whole idea of prioritizing self to help others.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so what we think about is a circle, which is all the stuff that you really want to spend your time, your energy, and focus on. And we call that your centered vision for your life. And within that are 5 categories that you would say like, okay, in a given day, this is where I would want to like really focus in my time. But then outside kind of the circle of where you wish you're spending your time and inside the box of life are all the things that have to get done, but that shouldn't define you. But they tend to define us over time if we don't address them with a really strategic plan. So at the top right corner are the non-negotiables. So those are the things like only you can do. So think about if you were a breastfeeding mom, like you're the only one who can pump or you're the only one who can feed your child directly. Another good example is for me as a physician, like I'm the only one that can write my patient notes. So I have to do that. And the way to address those things is to do them with as much efficiency as possible. And what I like to remind people is that a lot of times that's where advice for parents about managing stress starts and stops. It's like, how can you get things done faster? What's a hack? What's a way that you can do things in a quicker way, right? How can you like organize your closet better? How could you get like organizers for your kitchen, whatever? So there's a place for all of that. Streamlining meals is another place, but it's not the end. So you have the non-negotiables at the top. At the bottom right corner are the swappables. These are all the things that you do when you hold on to, but that other people could and should be doing for you. So this is like, if you have a partner, that maybe they could be doing the laundry instead of you. If you have kids, they could be picking up their rooms. You know, they can help, as you know, like starting at the age of like 2 or 3 with small chores, and it's really good for them. So if you don't have a partner, what are ways that you could help with your parenting village? But how could they help you? Like, for example, in our community, we have a Facebook group where people go to Costco and do Costco runs. And you can put like what you want from Costco, and then you just Venmo them what you want. So, and it's for all the Costco stuff that doesn't show up on Instacart. You know what I mean? Like all the like stuff you really want that doesn't actually show up. So that's a good example of like swappables. You save your time, you give it to somebody else. Left lower corner are the contaminators. These are all the things we say yes to that we don't need to be doing at all. So this is like, if I hate being on a PTA committee or any committee at all, really, that we're like, no, sorry, that's not for me. I'm not going to do it. Or this is your kid's 4th extracurricular activity that you're saying yes to because you're like, well, I don't know, everybody does soccer. I guess I should sign my kid up for soccer. But you end up hating your life every single Tuesday afternoon because you have to take your kid to soccer versus coming home and baking cookies with them. So those are things that you have to kind of clear your schedule. And it can be physical things like in your house, maybe a physical clutter, and that's taking up too much of your time and energy, cleaning it all up. Or it could be actual things that are time sucks or like mind mental load sucks. And then top left corner are the heartstrings. These are the things that need boundaries around them. So things that have to be done and we want to do them, but they cause us resentment or stress when they're not done in a way that works for us. My best example, again, with the holidays is like how we spend time with our in-laws or extended family, or how we exchange gifts. So I was telling you that, for example, this year we just bought a new house. We've spent way too much money. And so I told everybody like, hey, don't feel obligated to buy our kids gifts because we're not buying anybody gifts this year. Merry Christmas. Love you. We would love to spend time with you and like drink a, warm glass of cider, but that's going to be about it, or it could be for my child who has autism, that with her grandparents, when they come to visit, we always make sure that it's for a pretty limited amount of time, like 2 days. We always go to kind of a neutral spot as opposed to having them be in her house, because that kind of tends to trigger her. So we'll go to like a cheap hotel on the coast and spend 2 days doing that as opposed to being at their house or our house. So you have all of these ways then that you can manage stress, so that when you're in a moment of stress or of inner conflict, to be like, oh man, I feel ashamed, I can't do all these things, or I feel like I have so much stuff on my plate. You can go, okay, first of all, is this inside the circle or outside the circle? If it's outside the circle, now I have a strategy for dealing with for each of them. And in our entire program, we have like deep dives into exactly like the minutia of the strategies that you can do. If it's inside the circle, okay, then which is the most pressing part of this circle right now? Again, prioritizing. Yes, I care about my child, but is her cut finger the most important right now? Or is the fact she said, Tommy said, I hate you at school the most important? Or is the fact that she said you're a poopy pants to her sister the most important? Okay, it's her emotional feeling. So then you're going to like home in on that and pay attention there. At the very, very center of the circle is you, yourself as a human being. And that's what helps you to navigate and become your own navigational beacon, either within the circle or if you're outside or inside. So that's the self-compassion, that's spending time on the self-care, that's having a routine throughout the week of doing things you actually enjoy so you can remember what it feels like to feel good in a really healthy way. So that when you're not feeling that way, when you are feeling that shame, you can stop, visualize the framework in your mind and say, okay, where am I? What do I need to do to get myself in better alignment?
Thank you. The visual, like, how all different types of learners least for me, I'm very visual. I'm like, yeah, I can see it all now.
Yeah.
And how to
Mhm.
prioritize.
Exactly. And sometimes, when people first hear it, they're like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff to do. It's actually nothing to do. There's nothing to do. The only thing that you're doing is creating a structure, creating like scaffolding, so that when you feel that mental stress, so that when you have that feeling of like things are not right, you can go like, okay, why is it out of alignment? What can I do to get into better alignment? And you have like a direction to go pretty quickly. It's also not something that you do and then it's done once. I mean, like I said, right? This move that we had, I've been doing Modern Mommy Doc for years. It's not like I stopped being resentful ever. It's just that I am now able to not get stuck in resentment as quickly. And so are the rest of the people that have adopted this framework. They're able to not get overloaded as often and for as long.
And it's like, I was talking to a woman earlier today about, using positive language with her children, but, it's sort of the same idea of it's getting into that routine, right? It's not, you're not going to wake up one day necessarily and be like, okay, I now can label my emotion. I can, but it's just
Totally.
getting into that routine, that consistency, and having, I guess, some, grace with ourselves when we feel those feelings that we don't want to necessarily engage with.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is, I think, I'm a privileged white woman, right? So it would be easy to be like, oh, this is only for people that can afford to have a nanny living in their house. This is only for rich people. This is only for people who have means. And it's really not. It's, anyone can take 5 minutes to be in the shower a little bit longer and pay attention to their thoughts and have some mindfulness. It doesn't cost any money to read a book, for an hour. Of course, it'd be easier for someone who is a celebrity, like, Britney Spears, easier for her to go like delegate every single thing in her house, but there is still a way to do it with your parenting village. It doesn't have to mean you're outsourcing and hiring a house cleaner to do everything. Maybe it's just about you're going through with a garbage bag and you're clearing out clutter in your home and you're like donating stuff to Goodwill. And that's the thing that's going to help you with those contaminators in your life. So you don't have to be the person who lives in the lap of luxury to be able to adopt these principles. And we all have budgets, we all have limitations on our time, our energy, and our finances. And so it helps you, I think, to make better decisions though around those things so you can use them in the best way possible.
And I think too, sometimes, like we were talking about this earlier with the shame, but as a mom, sort of getting comfortable with asking for some help sometimes feels like that's an initial barrier sometimes because of these ideas. I think that, are in a lot of our heads of like, I can do it. Like other people seem to be doing it all. I should be able to do it all. I shouldn't ask somebody else for help, but recognizing that that's what's needed.
Yeah, totally. And that sometimes someone else can do it better than you can.
Yeah.
And not cause as many problems on the other end, like you will, I think that's part of it too, is like a little humbleness around like, actually, when I ask for help, I'm making it so I can be the best parent possible. I'm making it so I can be the best worker possible. I am terrible at tech. So I will spend all day long editing something. And now I've squandered all of my valuable resource that I could have been spending writing. That's the thing that only I can do within my Modern Mommy Doc organization. That's my job. Or speaking, that's my job. Holding meetings. But if I'm spending all my time doing all this other junk that I really am not really great at, it's going to steal away from that. And someone else is really excellent at it. So it's better if I can give them that opportunity.
Such a good point. So I'm mindful of everyone's time. I just want to open it up if there are any questions from the audience.
One thing I'm curious about, thank you for all of that. That was excellent. Is that I find so many parents today, like their sense of self-worth and their self-esteem is built on their role as a parent and their child as an extension of themselves, like true delicious narcissism, right? Like that what they're putting in is what they're going to get out in terms of this kid. And so everything, when I'm thinking of your list, I see so many parents who are like, well, I understand how that doesn't look important to you, but that is central to the mom I think I want to be, or the way I have in my mind. How do you start to get at that, which is really not about a rational person who can help make those lists for themselves, right? But more this like sense of self that isn't caught up in like, I made homemade gluten-free vegan, hand-drawn gingerbread cookies that are the best things anybody ever ate. And that feels really central to who I am, as opposed to like, I bought them at Costco.
Yeah. So I think that's a chicken and egg question. I think that sometimes when people spend so much time and energy on making sure that their kids are like perfect, really that's what you're doing. You're like making sure, like I need to make sure my child is perfect. Then they have to do even more work to make sure that their child continues to be perfect and that they are perfect. I don't think it has to be black and white. I think that you can still make vegan blah, blah cookies, gingerbread cookies, and decorate them and whatever, you know what I mean? But then you also can't probably decorate your house to the nth degree and pick your kids up from school and do these other things. So what I encourage people to do in my practice, especially because I see this all the time, especially with first-time parents, is to get people around you that are BS readers and who can be like, dude, what are you doing? What's going on here? Really? Like, can kind of like poke fun at you a little bit. Like surround yourself with some people that can give you a reality check. That has been so helpful to me. And in my practice, actually, we do that quite a bit with parents where they're like, I'm like, well, do you really need 10 of those little Patagonia jackets for your 2-month-old? Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe that's why you're having so much trouble in this regard, is because you've like overbundled your child with too expensive of items, right? So somebody can kind of call you on your stuff is a good plan. And then the other thing I think is just to make small incremental change. You do not have to like wholesale change your life and be like, okay, I'm done then. I'm not going to care about that at all. I think it's about catching yourself in the moment and being curious about the why behind it. And I'm sure, Erin, you would agree with that. Like, and that's true for adults for anything that we put our time and our energy into. Like, well, why does it matter to me that it's so clean? Well, is it because that allows me to think more clearly in my office? Okay, cool. Then my own office, my little space in here needs to be like super duper clean. And then there needs to be another space in the house that can be dirty, and that doesn't matter. But I think when you understand the why behind your actions and you get curious in a way that is as non-judgmental as possible, using mindful self-compassion, then you're able to make changes that are actually in better alignment with what you want. The other thing that I didn't talk about at Modern Mommy Doc is that when we start people out on this framework, we start them by having them do this visualization exercise where they think about in like 5 to 10 years, if they were living a life that was full of purpose and meaning and joy, what would that look like? And that's how they then define like, what are the 5 pieces of the pie in their centered vision. So then every decision that they make, they can like hold up to that mirror and say, well, is that in alignment? Maybe the gingerbread cookies are. Amazing. If that's part of your vision, cool, dude. Spend 20 hours a day doing that, but it's probably not. The other way to look at that is like, if I was at my 80th birthday party and someone was being like, I want to celebrate Whitney because she was so blah and blah and blah and blah in her life. Like, okay, great. That gives me a pretty good idea of my values, of the things that are the most important to me. So now I can arrange my practical day, but also my mental energy around those things. So that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. That's great.
That was great. And I think probably a great way to sort of, wrap up always thinking about the why and the larger picture. So important. I know everyone who's listening now and who will listen will want to find out more about you and about your work. So modernmommydoc.com, right? As well as modernmommydoc on Instagram.
That's right. Yeah, and then the app, which we are just revamping now and are so excited about, it sends out daily notifications to you that are reminders about what is important to you. You can schedule in your own reminders about like what are your values, so you can kind of do a BS check on yourself. There's memes that you can screenshot and share to your friends. You can go through your entire centered vision on there. So that the app is called the Modern Mamas Club. It's in the Apple App Store, and that's available for a monthly membership as well.
Thank you, Whitney. This was fabulous. And, I think really sort of is completely in line with what we want to do at Cooper as well. Focusing on a little different area, more of these virtual groups and these really important conversations like you and I had today. And, just creating a judgment-free area, like you're saying too, where parents can really talk to each other, they can talk to an expert, and really, figure out what's going on, right, for them and their child. So we have these groups for those of you who are listening, and you can sign up for them at beta.yourcooper.com. Right now, we're offering them for 0 to 6-year-old, for parents of 0 to 6-year-olds. And they are filling up. And you can also follow us on Instagram, which is your_Cooper. So thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you.